Today, we're kicking off our new financial book club. That's assuming, of course, that you've already read my book and went through all of that, which you can find on our channel. But today, we're going to do the financial book club of The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. This book isn't just about financial money strategies. It's really a lot deeper in the emotional side of it and how we make the choices that we make when it comes to our money. So let me grab Walt and we'll dive right in.
It's another episode of Power Your Retirement. I'm Walter Storholt alongside certified financial planner Steve Smith here as always. And you're right, Steve, we need to go make sure we read your book. You know, we launched the podcast, folks, covering Steve's book and walking through it chapter by chapter and getting kind of exclusive commentary. So while we're on the topic of books, please do go check out that series and tap into that. You can also get a copy of the book if you prefer to read it rather than watch or listen to it at powerupyour401k.com. We've got that linked in the description, so do go check that out. But today's focus is going to be all about Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money. And I got to think this is one of your favorite kind of topics, Steve, because it's not all about just the dollars in finance and retirement planning. Some of it's the softer side of planning, the psychology behind why we do what we do and feel what we feel.
80% of what I do, the value I bring at least, is going to be these types of topics. Now, there's a lot more than what we're going to go through today. We're just going to touch the surface, but really it's that soft stuff, the emotional stuff, how we process this, and the other 20% is just math.
Yeah, I like that. Now, we're going to give a quick disclaimer here before we jump into the recap of the book and the key concepts here. And that is that, like any book club, there's going to be several people attending the book club that haven't read the book. So if that's you watching today's show, no worries. We're going to give you kind of the Cliff Notes version of some of the key takeaways, and then, of course, still be able to kind of discuss some of these key points. So don't worry. I've been to a couple of book clubs over the years, Steve, where I haven't finished the reading material myself, so no worries on that front for anybody watching. You do not have to have read the book, although we recommend it. It's a good one to go check out. So what's The Psychology of Money all about? Well, it's from Morgan Housel. It's a best-selling book about how people think about and behave with money. And what Housel explains throughout the book is that financial decisions are often influenced more by emotions, experiences, and personal history, and actually less than, by logic or even math. And the book shares 19 total short stories that highlight why behavior is such an important part of financial success. So that sort of sets the tone. We've got 4 key takeaways to give you on today's episode, and we'll kind of break each one of these down. So, Steve, first of all, in the book, one of the main concepts is that no one is crazy. And Housel describes how different financial backgrounds, generations, incomes, and values, all of those things impact how someone views money.
No one is crazy because we all come from a different place. You might come from a home that there was plenty of money for everything. You might come from another home where scarcity was more of the theme. You might come from a period in time where things were booming. And you might come from a period of time when it was really, really bad time. So a lot of these just kind of happen to us. And also, we also pick up a lot of things from our parents of what their financial concepts were. And we don't really take the time to challenge them to see if they're right for us. We just adopt them. So when we say no one's crazy, it's just because we're a product of what we've been exposed to, our environment. And it's our responsibility to really take a look at what those are and if they're really appropriate for us and if we want to stick with those or not.
Yeah, I think it brings up some good points, and I'm interested to hear how you see this concept play out with your clients. I'm thinking of it just very specifically, like I graduated from college in 2009, so really bad job market, and that really shaped how I viewed employment and jobs and financial security and wanting to guard against if this ever happens again. And I contrast that with maybe somebody who's in their early working years now, maybe a recent graduate, And their difference might be the housing market is so much crazier than it was when I was able to buy my first house. So my attitudes about home ownership and affordability would be very different from somebody graduating in maybe today's circumstances that kind of are facing that a little bit. So yeah, you can see where different time periods are, how it might align with the different ways that we have biases and assume different things about finances and money.
100% agree. A risk tolerance is one of the main ideas of the risk tolerance questionnaire that we do, or at least a lot of times it's more of a conversation, but I go through them either way, is because we need to find out where everyone's at to make sure that we don't tickle that panic button if we're a little bit too aggressive, and we don't also people sit on in too much safety and we don't achieve the goals. So those are things, but we want to make sure we're sensitive to how that person processes risk, because the worst things happen when you hit a Great Depression, or in more recent history, that 2008 situation. I still hear, different people that are elderly talk about, oh, I lost all, half of my money or more. And the only way that was possible is if they panicked out, right? So those are things that we need to be in touch with, that soft side as an advisor, and know what it is, and be able to coach through that. Another one is emergency fund. That's probably a little more functional as far as how we shape that, with make sure we have enough for that, because a lot of us have found out where we had a little more a month in the money and had to either draw on a credit card or pull down on a retirement account or something like that along the way. And that struck a little bit of fear in all of us. So we need to make sure that we're appropriately planned, because an emergency fund is just a bad investment until it's needed. And then it's something that provides you the safety and security to make the right decisions with your real investments.
Yeah. I'm bad about robbing my emergency fund, so I made an emergency fund for my emergency fund. So at least when I robbed the one, I got a backup for that one. So I like tricked my own psychology a little bit in that way, I guess.
I actually recommend that theory. It's
Really?
so real.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll since you brought it up, it's a really great strategy. So
You're saying I'm a hidden genius, it sounds like. I like this.
I already knew that, but yes, that's that self-awareness soft side that I can bring to you, Walt.
I love it.
But it's so true. So most people have like a savings account where their checking account is, and it's so easy to be anywhere where you can just boop, money goes instantly over from one to the other. So I tell people, if they're tech savvy enough, to also have the larger one somewhere else, maybe an internet bank. Credit cards have one, American Express, Capital One, the list goes on, and they pay 3-4%, like usually more than what the bank is, sometimes even into fives, and have that up there because it takes 2 days to get it back into your checking account. So it's not an instant. So you have this one over here that's all the time, just a little massaging, and then for that big emergency, it's a little bit out of reach. Not totally, 2 business days, but still out of reach. And you'd be surprised if they just have the one at the bank, it depletes a lot faster than the one that's in the cloud.
Yeah, talk about the psychology of it. That's so true. There's some mental thing that happens when it's a little harder to get through to. It has much more sustainability. It really is interesting.
That's the soft. It seems like a small thing. Plus, they get a few extra bucks usually in interest, which is always nice as well.
I thought that was just a me thing, so I'm glad to hear that there's some other people.
No, that's real. That's real. But
similar boat.
People need to have that mapped out sometimes, and other people bring in with great things they're already doing. It just depends.
It's almost like Morgan Housel knew what he was writing about with this book. Let's look at another concept
you would think,
from him.
Right?
Yeah. This next concept is never enough. And Housel explains a story, and there's limitless stories probably about this. Wealthy men and women who end up in prison because of insider trading, and their careers and reputations are ruined forever. And why, when they were already successful and had enough money for multiple lifetimes? Well, he says they kept reaching for more. He said the hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. And I thought that was pretty profound. And have you seen that with clients or maybe prospective clients who have hurt themselves because of an inability to determine, I've got enough, and they keep moving the goalposts, and they start taking, maybe go back to risk, maybe too much risk? It doesn't always have to be fraud, right, that gets them in trouble, but could be other things.
Yes, I've not experienced fraud, with any clients who are really making anything crazy like that. But I understand the sentiment. And what really happens behind the scenes here is a couple different things. One is they start with this lifestyle deferral, right? Always wanting more. They kind of start thinking about that, and they want to have more so that they can buy this, and then they buy that. And what that does is starts drawing out of the real plan that they had before, that they were slowly going to accumulate, grow it, retire, that type of normal thing that an employee has. But once they start moving those goalposts, I like that language a lot. What happens is that there's a demand for more. And you either rob it from another goal. The easy one is the retirement from the future, right? Because you don't feel that today. The other thing is that maybe you increase risk, or you push to have more risk, more return. And then when you get that drawdown, you kind of, what does Warren Buffett say? When we had the big crash or the drawdown, the correction, whatever you want to do, you kind of find out who's swimming naked out there. Well, yeah. That's really what's going on there. There's too much risk, and some bad things happen. And that moving the goalpost, it feels so natural to go, oh, well, I really like that house, then I got this one. I really like that car, and then I got this one. And then, it doesn't all happen in a day. It's over years, but you got to be careful, and you got to bring that reality check in to make sure that we find, and this is to some people, the biggest grace they can have, and the others, it's a curse word, but to have that contentment in life, because that's really what you're going after. You're not going after happy. Sure, great. Hope you're happy, and we can always choose joy no matter what situation we're in. But finding that middle ground of contentment is really where I try to help all of my clients get to, so we have a goal and we don't have that lifestyle creep or that moving of the goalposts, because that can really be devastating.
Very underrated contentment is, I think. By the way, that quote from Warren Buffett was, "Only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked." So,
yes, thank you. Yeah. I was trying to go from memory, but thank you for that.
The old Google came in handy, or AI. I don't know which one it is these days. They're blended in, but that it helped. Yes. All right. Third concept in Morgan Housel's book is, and this is interesting, reasonable is more important than rational. So Housel says that one of the most important parts of finance is do not aim to be coldly rational when making financial decisions. Aim to be pretty reasonable. Reasonable is more realistic, and you have a better chance of sticking with it. Any further thoughts on that one?
Well, I think it's a great game to play, whether it's between spouses. It kind of creates some rules and maybe a little fun. When you're looking at decisions, it's definitely a great one to test between your advisor and yourself out there, because we like to justify as people. And maybe it's just me. I like to justify things, especially if they're things I really want. And if I'm looking at a new bicycle, I love biking, which if you read my book, you would know for sure. But I always want to buy a new bike, and I can find a lot of reasons to get a new bike every year. But my wife also has a lot of reasons to not buy a new bike every year for good reasons. You don't even want to know how many bikes I have in my house. So when we're talking about this reasonable versus rational, we really want to think it through a little bit, because when we're going through life, it always makes sense to save for a rainy day or save for retirement. I mean, that's always rational. Okay. But it's not always reasonable, depending on the amount. Because when we're going through, wouldn't it be a tragedy if I would have had some cheap, used Walmart bike my whole life and missed all the rides and all the cool places I've gone on mountain bikes and road bikes and trips? If I'd have missed that whole thing and got to 65 and wasn't able to do some of those things anymore, I could buy all the bikes I wanted, but I couldn't go out and do it. So we want to be reasonable as well. We want to make sure that, yes, get the bike, but don't get a new one every year, right? So we want to have that hobby. Or maybe it's, I really want to have, I've got the security thing and my advisor's got me, invested, that takes some risk. It goes up and down and around, but it's really been doing good for the last 10 years. So we also want to say, well, what would make it so that you would feel better? Well, if I lost my job and I had 2 years worth of income, that would make me feel completely secure. All right, well, we'll put that as a goal together rather than having 6 months, which might be on the short side. A year is probably more than plenty, but if that person really wants to work towards that allows them to do everything else correct financially, that's reasonable. Okay. Does the math work out? No. But it doesn't have to, because if that instills the confidence, it makes it reasonable. It's a great little game between a husband and a wife, or a spouse, or even between an advisor and a client, or a friend if you're single.
Yeah.
So those are things that games we should play all the time to make sure that our thinking is correct. Otherwise, I'd get a new bike every year, which wouldn't be the end of the world, I don't think. But anyways,
that's photography for me, right? So always buying the next greatest camera or new lens. And back to your previous points about contentment, that was something I went through over the last few months, trying to find contentment and okay, you've got a pretty sweet setup now. I think you can be content for a while for this hobby and enjoy the material, and don't long for all of these extra things and accessories that you don't really need. And so, but yeah, same kind of deal, and I love your comparisons there. I think of this one too is like where sometimes the math doesn't make sense. This might be maybe the stereotypical example for this one, but if you're you really want to have that paid off mortgage, even if you have a really low interest rate, you might just feel better having a paid off mortgage. And even though mathematically it might not be the best thing to do, if it makes you feel better and happier and relieves stress and makes you feel more free, then who's to say that's not the right decision to make?
I agree. And you can take a lot of financial punches in life, like losing a job, downsizing of a company, those types of things that happen. 2008 comes along, COVID comes along, whatever that was a pretty deep strike for you. If you have a paid off home and an emergency fund, you can take a lot of financial punches before you have to get into that retirement fund. So those are not, even if the math doesn't always work out, if they help you build the confidence, they'll definitely build your security. So those are things that I would not be opposed to, but I would definitely want to take time to explain, because the math doesn't work out. So that is something you want to go into knowing what you're doing.
Let's get to one final concept here from Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money. By the way, we've linked to the book in the description of today's show, just in case you want to pick it up and read it for yourself. And this concept is room for error. And Morgan Housel says that room for error is underappreciated and misunderstood, but that there is power in having a margin of safety or room for error. I would find it hard. I find it hard to argue against that, right, Steve?
Oh, definitely. And we've mentioned it, a couple of the primary strategies in that, and you want room for error in your emergency funds. We mentioned having that come in handy, in a downturn or a loss of job in that previous concept, but also having excess cash reserves is always great. Maybe room for error, we can broaden that a little bit beyond all the normal ones. I'll dive in a little deeper. We have what we call around here is a power shift path, and that's how people are approaching for retirement, so that when they have a plan, we actually have a method to make sure that whether the markets are up 30% or down 30%, they don't have to defer. So we have a patented method of how we do this, and work with 401ks and cash balance pensions and things of that nature to make sure that we have room for error so they can still retire at 60 or 62. So those are some more complicated ways that room for error is a great principle, but also in that day-to-day living, emergency fund, making sure that or even paying off the house that we just talked about. All those things are wonderful to make sure that when Murphy comes a knocking on your door, you're ready for him.
I love the points in this book. Your takeaways here were valuable, Steve. Thanks for sharing that. And it's a great chance for me to remind our viewers and those of you listening on your favorite podcasting app as well to reach out to Steve if you have any questions about managing your own finances, preparing for retirement, how to invest properly inside of your 401k and other retirement accounts, and how do you pull it all together to work with your financial future. Well, all of those kinds of conversations, the psychology of money type of conversation, as well as the math, is all covered in the planning process that Steve takes clients through. If you are an employee of a publicly traded utility, perk up your ears even more, because you should know that Steve, as a certified financial planner, also pioneered the relationship between a corporate 401k and a financial advisor, which really opened up the world to something bigger than just the typical 8 or so options that most employees can get their hands on inside of a 401k. Instead, with this ability that Steve and these relationships that he's been able to unlock with companies, he's able to introduce you to a much wider range of options, investments, opportunities, and decision-making inside of those plans that otherwise you don't have access to. So it's pretty cool. You can learn all about that and more when you get in touch, but I wanted you to be certainly aware of that as well. We've got contact information for Steve listed in the description of today's show, so you can find it easily, always at powerupyour401k.com. And Steve, thanks so much for all the help on the episode today. We passed with flying colors, I think, through the book club, even if we did or didn't actually read the book.
Well, I'm excited for the next book that we'll embark on, and I appreciate everyone listening out there, and thank you, Walt.
Yep, thanks so much. We'll see everybody soon right back here on Power Your Retirement. This podcast is provided by Powerhouse Financial Advisors, an independent firm with advisory services offered through Parsonex Advisory Services, Inc., PAS, a federally registered investment advisor. The information provided is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered as personalized investment advice. PAS does not guarantee the accuracy, completeness, or suitability of this information for your specific circumstances. Investment decisions should be based on an individual's goals, time horizon, and risk tolerance. Past performance is not indicative of future results, and all investments carry a degree of risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any case studies, testimonials, or endorsements shared in this podcast are illustrative of individual experiences and may not be representative of the experience of all clients. They do not guarantee future performance or success. You should not infer any level of assurance regarding future financial outcomes. Listeners should consult with a qualified financial, tax, or legal professional before making any investment decisions. Parsonex Advisory Services, Inc. does not provide tax or legal advice. Be sure to consult with your tax and legal professionals regarding your specific circumstances. For a copy of our Form ADV Part 2A, which provides additional information about PAS, including our advisory fees and services, please visit powerhousefinancialadvisors.com.